Hey there, welcome back. Episode 7. I've always wanted to do one outside, but it's always been so windy and I don't have the best microphone. But I like this backdrop. I think it's very pleasant. My wife and I like sitting out here looking at it. And I feel like that this backdrop make a good contrast to this particular story I'm about to tell because it's kind of dark and depressing. So hopefully I can talk over and overpower the wind and the occasional semi if that shows up on the recording. There's a highway behind me a couple miles back. I'm always hearing the semis. Alright, so before I begin this next one, I just want to remind everyone that God has always been in total control of my life, no matter how many terrible choices I made, and no matter how far I eventually walked away from Him, which was pretty far. It may be hard at times to see it, especially with the way I tell some of these stories, but believe me, God's fingerprints are all over every event and situation and circumstance. I praise Him for keeping me alive through it all, and I'm going to testify to His goodness right now with this beautiful backdrop. I am back in New York, enjoying my 2-week leave before I was to ship out for Colorado Springs and begin my first duty assignment. I am absolutely overflowing with arrogance and cockiness. So I decided it was time to add some accessories to my newfound success. For the first time in my life, at least as an adult, I was brimming with confidence. So I made 2 very in-your-face and pump my fist in defiance alterations to my appearance. First was getting a tattoo. The second was piercing my ears. Now, hear me, I am not being judgmental. There is nothing wrong in of themselves with piercing ears and tattoos per se. I personally was doing it as defiance. I was showing my parents that, you know what, I don't care that you raised me differently. I'm going to do what I want because I'm awesome and you can't stop me. Anyway, the day came where I was supposed to ship out, and for those of you who know anything about Syracuse, New York, know that snow can come quickly and very aggressively, which it did. A blizzard showed up and halted all the flights from the airport that day, as in the day I was supposed to be leaving. I wasn't able to fly out to the next day, which means I'd be late for my very first assignment. In other words, I would be AWOL, absent without leave, which the military does not look too favorably on. I called the base, told them what was happening. I don't know why, apart from being able to look back now and seeing God's fingerprints all over this, but they were furious with me, as if I should have seen the future and got a flight out earlier or somehow stopped the snow. My previous arrogant and confident feelings, they started disappearing, and my self-loathing and suicidal feelings were slowly returning. So I flew out the next day. I was picked up at the airport by somebody from the base. He was very annoyed with me because, as he told me for the entire drive from the Denver airport to Colorado Springs, he had to drive out special just for little old me because I was late instead of showing up on time with the other 7 that he picked up the day before. I apologized. He didn't care. He wanted to gripe and complain. I arrive at base, and at least half of my officers were giving me the business about being late, and now I am behind. I have a whole lot of work to put in to catch up with the other 7. I apologized endlessly, but nobody cared. I was now at the Air Force Academy. I needed to get myself squared away and represent its etherealness immediately. All the good vibes and hard work and respect that I'd earned during training were completely erased. Later, I was told that none of this bullying and verbal abuse that I'm about to tell you that I endured from my higher-ups, this wouldn't have happened if I just went to Okinawa like originally planned. I was treated this way because I was at the academy. So, for the first month or so, we went through a whole bunch of extra training, mostly centered around being a cop in general. All my previous training before was all centered around being the Air Force's equivalent of a soldier or a Marine, to kind of give that example. But now at the academy, it was cop training at all times. I was finally settling in a little because much of this was centered around the physicality of being a cop, which was my bread and butter. But there was, some classroom settings interspersed. And I think one of the first or second settings, we were all of us, myself and the 7 that came with me and a bunch of other cops, were all in this one big room. There's probably about 20 to 30 of us. And the subject that we were being taught was how to spot and to smell pot, marijuana. Okay, I had never seen or smelled pot in my life, so this was intriguing to me. One of the sergeants who was leading that class was also one of the ones who was very mad at me and chewed me out when I was late. When I came there, it was a day late, as I told you. He had a tiny little bud of pot, put it in a can, lit it, and walked around the room and put it in front of everybody's noses for them to get a sniff. I had a really bad head cold at that point. I couldn't smell anything. So when it came to me and I tried to smell it, I smelled nothing. The guy, assuming I had smelled it, started to walk away. What I brilliantly did, I grabbed his arm and pulled him back and put my nose right in it into a super deep smell. I could not smell it. He absolutely bawled me out in front of everybody. He's shaming at me, he's bullying me, he's screaming at me, accusing me of trying to get high in front of everybody. They're all just kind of like looking at my absurdity of trying to get high because they assume that's what I was trying to do too. And I'm like, no, I swear to you, I can't smell it. I have a cold. Didn't matter. He was determined to be mad at me. Time moves on. My daily struggle of trying to repair my damage was not working for me because most people just would not cut me any slack. Of the 7 who came with me, only one of them stayed my friend. During training, these were some of my closest friends, but now they were all worried because they were told to be worried by their higher ups that if they associated with me now, they continued to be my friend, my stink would get on them and their careers would suffer. So once again, my friends abandoned me, except for that one. And that one, easily my best friend in the military, an incredibly good guy. I am very grateful to him. He did his best to help me repair my career and get it back on track. But the depression and the self-hatred, it had completely taken over my life. So there was no hope, no helping the situation. I started smoking and drinking, but I hated feeling drunk, so I didn't drink a whole lot. I did smoke a lot, that's for sure. I don't know, all those Marlboro Man ads felt very cool smoking. Since none of the cops were hanging out with me, I had to become friends with all the other non-cops in the big giant dorm that I lived in. I started hanging out with them, made friends with them, and there was one particular guy who was friends with a civilian who was always on base hanging out. He had just gotten a modeling contract and told me that I needed to talk to his agent about acting. I did. His agent liked me enough to set me up with some headshots. I didn't go on any auditions at this point yet, but I kind of tell you all this to set up for a story I'm going to tell later on, because I eventually did start going to some auditions. All right, I'm going to start wrapping this up. I want to give a couple pertinent stories to finish my military time. The natural flow of training was for everybody to eventually have their own police car and do cop things on base. Those who hadn't earned the right to be a real cop were stuck at the 2 gates on the base, monitoring people coming and going. Guess where I spent my entire time? The academy, the way it worked, is an open base, which means that anybody, civilian or military, could come and go as they please. They never had to stop and check at the gate, never had to show any ID, nothing. It didn't matter. My job as one of the military police was to look pretty, represent the academy well, stop people if they're driving too fast through the gates, and above all else, salute the cars with the blue military stickers. Blue stickers meant that an officer owned that car. Now, it didn't necessarily mean that an officer was driving that car, just that he owned it. Oftentimes, it would be the officer's wife or one of his kids taking the car on the base. The way this base is set up is in the morning, the Rocky Mountain sun comes up over those mountains and brutally reflect off the windshields of all the cars coming onto base. It was really, really hard to see those blue stickers. Also in the morning, there was always a traffic jam of cars coming onto the base who didn't need to stop. So I had to really be on my game because they're just coming like fast, coming at me. I had to make sure I'm waving them in. Oh, stop, there's a blue sticker. Do a little salute real fast and keep them going. Problem was, I didn't always see those stickers. So occasionally, a car would stop at the gate, holding up traffic, and honk their horn. I'm assuming that they need help or questions. No, they're honking their horn, pointing at the little sticker that's up there by the rear view mirror and demanding that I salute their car. I'm just overcome with anger at this point. I'm like, I snap that salute, let them go, and I'm left to seethe in my anger. Oftentimes, the people who would demand that I salute them would get to where they're going on base and call the police headquarters and complain. Tell them that I am not saluting them. And one of my sergeants would invariably call me and chew me out for not saluting. I would tell them, I promised them, I'm like, I am not trying to be defiant. I can't see the stickers. And they're like, just salute every car then. I'm thinking, that's not the way I was trained. I was trained to salute only the blue stickers, but I just was sick of getting yelled at all the time. Didn't matter how much I tried to do my best. These cops, they wouldn't let me out of the doghouse. It didn't matter how hard I tried to repair my first impression. They just wanted to be mad at me. Thankfully, there were a couple of cops who were, had my back and trying to help me get things squared away. They told me that one of the ways to repair my damage is to be an obnoxious cop at the gate, which basically looked like stopping everybody who were going faster than the posted 15 miles an hour through the gates and write them tickets. I hated this. I hated being the obnoxious cop that was pulling everybody over, but I was more concerned with repairing my reputation, so I was doing it. One day there was a civilian contractor who was coming on the base. He was driving a beat-up truck, one of those old kind of trucks that had the metal, side mirrors. They were old-fashioned, and it was a cool truck, but it was an old truck. He was flying through the gate. He was going very fast. He was clearly going probably 30 miles an hour. I stop him. I ask for his license. I knew he was coming on to do some construction work. I had no plan to write him a ticket. Just wanted him to give me his license, and I needed to see they didn't have any warrants or anything. He refused. He said, "No, I'm not giving you my license." I asked him again, very politely, respectfully. Still refused and told me, "I'm just a mall cop. He doesn't need to listen to me," and started driving on to base. Something inside me snapped, okay? I was at this point where my damaged mind no longer cared if I lived or died. All I cared about was repairing my image. So I jumped onto his truck, standing on those running boards and hanging on to that mirror I was saying, and telling him to stop. He's not stopping. In fact, he's picking up speed. He was determined to drive me wherever he was going. I decided I better jump off this truck and get out of the way. So I do. I get on my radio, I call and say, "You need to pull this lunatic over." I'm trying to explain to them what happened. But then I noticed that just inside the base, past the gate, there's a U-turn. So he U-turns, in the median, and he's coming back out on the exit lanes. So I, being incredibly smart person that I am, run across the median, jump in front of him, put my hand up, telling him to stop, and have my hand on my gun. It's not completely out of the holster. It's certainly not pointing at him, but it was very clear that I meant business. He also meant business, that he's not stopping for me. So we are now two immovable objects about to collide. Truck's gonna win. Didn't matter how many bullets I have in that gun. He's gonna run me over. So I dove out of the way. I dove into the median. He keeps on going and hightails it out of there. As I'm laying in the grass, my backup finally shows up. I tell him everything that happened and tell him the whole story. My captain, who was one of the only few cops who actually liked me and stood up for me, told me that I had every right to shoot him, but he was oh so glad that I did not, because that clearly would have looked very bad for the military, the Air Force Academy, that I shot somebody. The next day, this contractor, he comes back onto base, but uses the other gate. The cop who was at that base, or at that gate that day, he radios me and gives me the description of this guy in his truck. I say, yep, that's him. Pull him over. So the patrol, the other patrol cops, they went and pulled him over, ran his license, squeaky clean, no records. There was nothing there. There was no reason for him not to give me his license, other than the fact he just didn't want to be harassed by me. He was just late. He'd been yelled at before by his boss for being late. He didn't want to be late again, and he had no time for me. Thankfully, this whole incident kind of earned me, hold on, water time. This whole incident had earned me some much needed respect and cred, but it didn't last long. The cops had laid off me for a couple days, but it returned pretty quickly because I was still missing these insipid blue stickers and not saluting them, and the drivers of these blue stickered cars were constantly calling the station and complaining about me. There was one particular colonel's wife who she was determined to crush me and destroy me. She knew me by name. She would call up and say, "Airman Jones did not salute me again." She had enough. She demanded that they arrest me for insubordination. Because her husband was so high up and so high ranked, they had no choice. They had to arrest me. So a couple cops showed up and threw me in some cuffs. This would not be the last time I ended up in cuffs, that's for sure. My time in the military, it was definitely wrapping up at my arrest. But let me go back and tell you a very, very quick story that ended up being the final nail in my military coffin. The depression and hopelessness, it was winning. I'm getting yelled at every day. I was constantly failing these classroom tests that I needed to pass so that I could rank up. I was overwhelmed. Nothing was working. I just didn't matter. Anything physical I needed to do, I excelled at, but anything classroom related, forget about it. So one very, very specific day at my gate, the self-loathing voices that were constantly berating me had ratcheted up their diatribe. They were all insisting that I needed to put myself and everybody that still loved me, which they were quick to remind me were not a whole lot left, out of their misery and just kill myself already. I'm listening to these voices. It made sense. They seemed to speak wisdom to me. I tried my best at life, but I was a total failure, and there was just no reason to continue delaying the inevitable. At this gate, you can see for probably almost half a mile out in the distance. There's kind of like a wide open field, prairie kind of a thing. I don't know if it's still like that now. 25 years ago, that's how it was. You could easily see if there were any cars coming for quite a long time. After the morning rush, I decided that this was it. This was going to be the end. I needed to go into the bathroom, which was part of this gate. It was actually quite roomy and comfortable in there. It was heated, had AC. It was a pretty sweet gig. It was time for me to go in that bathroom and be done with it. I walk in the bathroom, take one final look out on the horizon to see if any cars are coming. Nothing. I had a good half-mile distance. No one was coming. Close the door. I pull out my gun, uncock it, start bringing it up to my head, when all of a sudden I start hearing honking. Not even 10 seconds had passed since I'd been in there, and all of a sudden there's now a car at the gate honking. So I quickly put my gun back into my holster. I uncocked it first and put it into my holster. Opened up the bathroom doors, kind of looked out, and there's a guy waving at me, pleasantly, smiling. He's like, come here, come here, come here. So I go over, and he just had questions. He wanted, he was a civilian. He was a tourist. He wanted to check, ideas of where to go, look, and directions. So spent about 5 minutes talking to him, and by that time, traffic picked back up, so I need to get back to waving people in, saluting, and in that time, I lost my resolve and my courage to end it all. All right, back to the time when I was arrested. I am at the police station, and I'm in cuffs. One of the procedures is to talk to a psychiatrist after you've been arrested to see if you need some help. Now, nobody knew about the incident I had just told. Nobody knew about my mental structure, about my mental struggles, okay? So the psychiatrist is doing his little checklist, asking me the questions, and he gets to the ever classic, have you ever thought about harming yourself or others? I got kind of quiet. I said, yes. And he said, okay, have you ever tried? I looked down because tears are starting to well up in my eyes. And I just kind of like shook my head and said, tell me. So I just told him that story, and that was it. There was the end of my military time. This psychiatrist told me that it was time that the Air Force and I broke up and never got back together. That is almost a direct quote. That's almost exactly what he said to me. I was getting a medical discharge that would eventually turn into an honorable discharge, which I am, very thankful for. But I needed to wait for 2 weeks as they finalized my discharge. Obviously, I was never allowed to carry a gun or perform any cop duties. And since I was still getting a paycheck, I needed to do busy work for those 8 hours on shift. That busy work basically looked like washing cop cars, filling them with gas, cleaning the station, whatever. So, time came. It was time for me to leave. Problem was, I couldn't get a flight out at the 2 week mark. I had one more day left to kill before I was to fly out. But I was no longer in the military. So which means I was not allowed to sleep on base because I'm no longer an airman. I couldn't sleep in any of the structures, nothing. And I couldn't afford a hotel. So one of my buddies who lived in the dorm said, you can go ahead, Jeremy, you can sleep in my car, it's fine. I guess I'm allowed to sleep in the parking lot just as long as that parking lot wasn't inside an actual military structure. So it's December. I'm sleeping in a car. I am homeless. First time in my life, I am homeless. I didn't sleep much that night. Cold. I didn't want to turn on the car and, waste all the gas. And also because the depression was getting me. All I could do was think about, I had to go home and face a family that was incredibly disappointed in me. I'd already been kicked out of college, and I just got kicked out of the military. I was failing so tremendously at life. I could not imagine how I was ever going to make anything of myself. The path I was about to walk was so utterly disastrous, so off the charts messed up, so full of substance abuse. It is a miracle that I'm here right now telling you the story with this gorgeous backdrop behind me. My out of control prodigal son journey, it was cresting over the horizon, and it would begin 2 days after I got back from New York, which I will tell you what happened waiting for me with the next story. All right, wrapping this up, as I always do, I put a little bow on this by encouraging those of you who are suffering from mental health to go to my website, to check out the different links I have. For those of you that are suffering from suicidal tendencies, let me just put my little 2 cents in here on this. It is a trite saying that suicide is the most selfish act anybody can do. It is not trite, because suicide is like a rock dropped in a pond, okay? The whole trite rippling effect. It doesn't end with you killing yourself. It spreads. That ripple of that horrible, heinous act that you've done spreads out and touches everybody in your life. Don't listen to the voices that tell you, nobody cares, kill yourself, no one's gonna miss you. That's a lie. Everybody has at least one person in their life that cares about them. Some of those people that care about you, you are now going to curse their lives with having to deal with the sadness and the fallout of you no longer being there. Some of these people might even take it upon themselves to feel guilty, as though they should have seen the warning signs sooner and stepped in and helped you. That is just a horrible thing to do to people. suicide is not only about you, it's about everybody around you. So please don't play around with this. Don't play around with, I'll deal with it tomorrow. If you're feeling these thoughts, get at it right now. Go to my website, as I just said, and look at the different links. But most importantly, look at the link that talks about knowing who Jesus is, because that is the most important thing you can do in this life, is knowing who Jesus is and what he has done for you. God the Father longs for us, all of us, to come to him and admit that we can't do life on our own, that we need help. He can't wait to have us come to him. So please do it. Do it today. Humble yourself and admit that you are in need of help. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Enjoy the last view of this. This is pretty gorgeous. We're getting towards the end here. It's fall time. Until we talk again next time, keep pressing on.